There are two questions to answer before you cut a hydrangea, and this video answers both fully. When to prune it and how to prune it. Those are the two things people search for, and they are the two things that, done right, give you a plant covered in flowers, and done wrong, leave you with a healthy green bush and nothing on it. Of those two questions, the more important one, by a wide margin, is when. This surprises people, because they assume pruning is mostly about technique, about making the right cuts in the right places. It is not. You can make every cut perfectly and still destroy the plant's flowering if you make those cuts at the wrong time of year. And you can be quite rough and clumsy with your cuts and still get a beautiful display, as long as you cut at the right time. Timing is what actually decides whether a hydrangea blooms. Technique just makes a tidier job of it. So I am going to do this in two halves to answer the title cleanly. First, when the whole timing question worked out for every type of hydrangea you might have, because this is the part that matters most and the part people get wrong most. Then, how, the actual technique, the cuts themselves, both the universal method that applies to every hydrangea and the specific approach for each type. And underneath both halves sits one single distinction that decides everything: when to cut and how much to cut. It is the difference between a hydrangea that blooms on old wood and one that blooms on new wood. And once you understand it, both the when and the how become genuinely simple. So I will explain that first, before either half, because it is the key that unlocks the whole thing. There is also a point where the honest answer to when is never, and the honest answer to how is do not, because pruning is not always the right move, and I will be straight with you about that at the end, along with the things pruning simply cannot fix. By the end of this, you will be able to look at any hydrangea, know when it wants cutting and how, and know when to leave it alone. No more guessing, and no more accidentally cutting off a whole year of flowers. But first, the one distinction the entire subject rests on: old wood versus new wood. Every hydrangea flowers in one of two ways, and which one yours does decides both when you cut it and how much you can take off. A hydrangea blooms either on old wood or on new wood. Old wood means the plant forms next year's flower buds late in the current season, in late summer and autumn, on the stems that are standing on the plant right now. Those buds form and then wait there through the whole winter, dormant, until spring opens them. So, on an old wood hydrangea, next year's flowers are already on the plant as tiny buds through the winter and into spring. The wood is a year old by the time it blooms, which is where the name comes from. New wood means the plant forms its flower buds in spring. On fresh growth, it pushes out that same year and flowers on that brand new growth a few months later. Nothing waits over winter. The whole cycle, bud to bloom, happens within a single season. That one difference sets the timing for both groups. On an old wood plant, next year's buds sit on the stems from late summer right through to spring, so cutting those stems in autumn, winter, or early spring removes the buds and the flowers with them. Old wood hydrangeas can only be pruned in the short window right after they finish flowering in summer, or left alone. On a new wood plant, there are no buds on the plant over winter to lose, so you can cut it back hard while it is dormant, and it simply grows fresh flowering wood in spring. New wood hydrangeas are pruned in late winter or early spring before growth begins. Here is how the common types split. Blooming on old wood: the big leaf, the classic mophead and lace cap, the mountain hydrangea, the oak leaf, and the climbing hydrangea. Blooming on new wood: the panicle, with its cone-shaped flowers, and the smooth hydrangea, the Annabelle type with the big white balls. So as I go through the when and the how, everything traces back to this. Old wood types, cut in summer after flowering. New wood types, cut in late winter. Hold on to that split, because it is the whole framework. Now, the first half, when. Let us start with the old wood types, and exactly when their window opens and closes. So, when, starting with the old wood types, the big leaf mopheads and lace caps, the mountain hydrangea, the oak leaf, and the climbing hydrangea. These all share one narrow window, and it is easy to state. Prune them right after they finish flowering, and at no other time. Here is why the window is where it is. These plants set next year's buds in late summer, within weeks of finishing this year's flowering. So there is a short gap, right after the blooms fade in summer, when this year's flowers are spent but next year's buds have not yet formed. That gap is your window. Cut in it, and you remove old growth without touching next year's buds. Cut before it, and you lose this year's late blooms. Cut after it, once the new buds have set, and you remove next year's flowers. In practice, that means summer, roughly midsummer to late summer, as soon as the flowers have faded, and finished before the plant sets its buds for next year. For most gardens, that is a window of a few weeks after flowering, and once it closes, the plant is off limits until after it blooms again next year. Which leads to the single most important timing rule for these plants, the one that prevents the most heartbreak. Never prune an old wood hydrangea in autumn, winter, or spring. That is exactly when people do it, because the plant looks bare and dormant, and it seems like the natural time to cut things back, and it is precisely when next year's buds are sitting on the stems waiting. A dormant season cut on a mop head is the single most common reason people get a big, healthy, leafy plant that stubbornly refuses to flower. There is an honest caveat worth adding for the oakleaf and the climbing hydrangea specifically. Both of these are plants you should barely prune at all, regardless of the window. The oakleaf's beauty is its natural shape and bark and autumn color, and the climber, once established, just wants to be left to fill its space. So for those two, the window still applies if you must cut, but the honest answer is usually to cut very little or nothing. Now, the other group, and their timing, is almost the mirror image, the new wood types. Now the new wood types, the panicle with its cone-shaped flowers and the smooth hydrangea, the Annabelle type. Their timing is almost the mirror image of the old wood group. Prune them in late winter or early spring, while the plant is still dormant, before it starts into new growth. The reason follows directly from how they flower. These plants make their buds in spring on fresh new growth, so through the winter there are no flower buds sitting on the plant to protect. That means you can cut them while they are dormant, with nothing to lose, and the plant responds by pushing out vigorous new stems that carry the flowers a few months later. So the dormant season, which is the forbidden time for the old wood types, is exactly the right time for these. The specific window is late winter into very early spring, before the buds break and new growth begins. In practice, you want to catch the plant near the end of its dormancy, when the worst of the cold is passing but before it wakes up. Prune too early, in autumn or early winter, and you risk the cut stimulating tender growth that the cold then kills, and you also lose the winter structure of the plant. Prune too late, after growth has surged, and you are cutting off the very shoots that would have flowered. Late winter, just before the plant stirs, is the sweet spot. There is a reason this timing is genuinely forgiving, which is worth knowing. Because these plants flower on new growth, even if you are a little early or a little late, the plant will still flower that year, just perhaps not quite as strongly. You cannot make the catastrophic, whole season lost mistake with a new wood type that you can make by cutting an old wood type in winter. The stakes on exact timing are lower here. One optional note: you do not have to cut these in late winter at all, if you would rather leave the dried flower heads on for winter interest, which many people do because they look beautiful with frost and snow on them. You can leave them standing through winter and simply do the pruning at the tail end, in late winter, before growth begins. Either way, late winter is when the cut happens. Now, a quick word, because both halves of this, the when and the how, depend entirely on one thing. Quick one, right here, because everything so far, and everything still to come, depends on one thing: knowing which of the 6 types you actually have. The whole timing question splits on it, and the technique does too. Name your plant correctly, and the when and the how both fall into place. Get it wrong, and you cut a mop head in winter thinking it is a panicle, and lose a year of flowers without ever understanding why. So I put the honest version in one place. and it is built to answer exactly the question this video keeps returning to. It is called the Hydrangea Mastery Guide. It sorts all 6 types in about 90 seconds, with the identifying features laid out, so you can match your plant with certainty before you make a single cut. And at its heart is the Prune by Type calendar, the one reference that gives you, for your specific hydrangea, exactly when to cut it and exactly how much, so you never stand there guessing again. Everything in this video, in a form you can hold in one hand at the plant. It also clears up the questions that sit right next to pruning because they trip up the same people. The real reason the color changes, which is not the pH, whatever you were told. The 5 most common myths that cost people a whole season, and the honest limits, laid out plainly. 29 pages, $27, an instant PDF you can open on your phone right at the plant, a 7-day money-back guarantee, and the link is in the description at waltgreer.com, and it ends the way this channel always does, with the truth included. 4 of the 6 types cannot change color no matter what you pour on the soil. Fertilizer will never fix a hydrangea that will not bloom, and no pruning technique saves a plant whose buds were killed by cold. A guide that only tells you what to do is only half a guide. Now, the second half of the video. How? Starting with the universal technique that applies to every hydrangea you own. Now, how? Start with the technique that applies to every hydrangea, whatever the type, because these fundamentals make every cut cleaner and safer. And then I will cover what is specific to each group. Begin with the tools, because good cuts start there. Use clean, sharp, bypass secateurs, the kind that slice past each other like scissors, for most hydrangea stems, because they give a clean cut that heals quickly. For thicker, older, woody stems, move up to loppers, or a pruning saw rather than forcing the secateurs, which crushes the stem and leaves a ragged, slow-healing wound. And keep the blades clean, wiping them with a household disinfectant between plants, and especially after cutting anything diseased, because dirty blades carry disease from plant to plant. Now, where to actually make the cut, which is the same on every hydrangea. Cut just above a healthy pair of buds or a leaf node, a small distance above it, rather than leaving a long stub above the buds or cutting so close that you damage them. The plant grows from just below your cut, so cutting to a good pair of outward-facing buds directs the new growth outward, opening the plant up rather than crowding its center. A long stub above the buds simply dies back and can rot. There is one rule that overrides the timing calendar entirely. Dead, damaged, and diseased wood can be removed from any hydrangea at any time of year. Those 3, the 3 Ds, carry no flower buds worth keeping and only harm the plant, so you never wait for a window to take them out. A dead cane, a broken stem, a diseased branch. Remove it whenever you see it. When you take a whole stem out this way, cut it right back to the base or to a main branch, without leaving a spike, and hold on to the principle that protects you whenever you are unsure. When in doubt, do not cut. A hydrangea left unpruned still flowers. A hydrangea cut wrongly may not. So if you cannot remember what your plant is or what it needs, leaving it alone this year is always the safer choice. Those fundamentals apply to every hydrangea on Earth. What changes between the types is how much you take off and to what shape, which is where we go now, starting with the old wood group. Now, how to prune the old wood types specifically. How to prune the old wood types. The big leaf mopheads and lace caps, the mountain, the oak leaf, and the climbing hydrangea. The theme here is restraint, because these are plants that mostly want to be left alone, and the cutting you do in that summer window is light. Start with the big leaf and mountain hydrangeas, which are handled the same way. In their summer window, right after flowering, the main job is deadheading, removing the spent flower heads. Cut just below the faded bloom, above the first pair of healthy leaves, and stop there. That tidies the plant and takes nothing you want to keep. What you do not do is keep cutting down the stem to reduce the plant's size, because that is where next year's buds are forming. Beyond deadheading, these plants need very little. If yours is overgrown or congested, you can renew it by removing one or two of the very oldest, woodiest stems entirely, cutting them right down to the base, which lets younger, more productive stems take over. But only a couple, and only in that summer window. Do not shear the whole plant back into a ball or cut it down for size, ever, because that removes the flowering wood. For most healthy big-leaf hydrangeas, deadheading and the occasional old stem removed is the whole job. The oak leaf is even lighter. Its beauty is its natural branching shape, its bark, and its autumn color, and heavy pruning ruins all of it. So the honest approach is to prune it hardly at all. Remove a genuinely wayward branch in the summer window if you must. Take out dead wood whenever you see it, and otherwise leave it to grow into its natural form. The climbing hydrangea is similar. Once established, it just wants to fill its space. So pruning is mostly about keeping it in bounds, cutting back shoots that are reaching into gutters, windows, or off its support, done in the summer window after flowering. On a young climber that is not yet flowering, the answer is patience rather than cutting, because these take a few years to settle in and bloom. So, across the whole old wood group, the how is gentle. Deadhead. Remove the odd, old, or wayward stem, take out dead wood, and otherwise let these plants be. Now, the new wood types, where the how is genuinely different, because here you cut hard. How to prune the new wood types, the panicle and the smooth Annabelle. Here the how is genuinely different, because these are the plants you cut hard, in late winter, and they reward it. Take the panicle first, the one with the cone-shaped flowers. The goal with a panicle is to prune it back to a permanent framework each year. You let the plant build a woody structure of main stems at roughly the height you want it. And then each late winter you cut the previous season's growth back toward that framework, shortening those stems by about a third to a half, down to a healthy pair of buds. That concentrates the plant's energy into fewer, stronger stems, which gives you bigger, more dramatic flower heads, and it builds a sturdy structure that holds those blooms up rather than letting them flop. You have real control with a panicle, more than with any other hydrangea. Cut it back harder, to fewer buds, for a smaller number of very large flower heads. Cut it more lightly for a taller plant with more, slightly smaller heads. Either way, take out any thin, weak, crossing, or dead stems entirely while you are at it, to keep the framework open and strong. The one thing to avoid is leaving it completely unpruned year after year, which turns it into a congested tangle of weak, twiggy growth with smaller and smaller blooms. Now the smooth hydrangea, the Annabelle, which takes the hardest cut of all, and comes with the flopping problem you have to plan around. You can cut an Annabelle right down to near ground level in late winter, and it will send up strong new stems and flower the same summer. But cutting it that hard every year is often what causes the famous flopping, because the plant regrows tall, soft, whippy stems that cannot hold those huge, heavy flower heads up, and the whole plant sprawls in the first rain. So the honest how for an Annabelle is usually not to cut it right to the ground, but to prune it back to a low framework of sturdier older stems, around 18 inches to 2 feet tall. That woodier base gives the new growth something stronger to rise from and holds the blooms upright, so you get the big flowers with far less flopping. Cut lower only if you will stake it, or if you prefer the tallest plant and do not mind the sprawl. Now, the honest part, the times when the answer to how and when is do not, and what pruning cannot fix. Now the honest part, because the real answer to when and how is sometimes do not, and because pruning gets asked to fix things, it simply cannot. Start with the times not to prune at all. Do not prune any hydrangea right before winter, in late autumn. On the old wood types that removes next year's buds, and on any type a late cut can force tender growth or leave open wounds that frost damages, causing dieback. And for the oak leaf and the climbing hydrangea, as I said, the honest answer is usually to prune very little at all, because their beauty is in being left alone. Pruning is not an annual obligation for every hydrangea. For several of them, doing less or nothing is the right call. Now, what pruning cannot fix, because this matters when a hydrangea will not bloom and you are tempted to reach for the shears. Bad pruning is the most common reason for no flowers, but it is not the only one, and cutting will not solve the others. The most common non-pruning cause is winter cold, killing the buds on the old wood types. Those buds sit exposed on the stems all winter, and a hard freeze, or a warm spell followed by a sharp frost, kills them. The plant then leafs out green and healthy but produces few or no flowers, because the flower buds died, not the leaf buds. No cut brings those back. If this happens every year, the fix is winter protection, or growing a new wood type like a panicle or smooth, whose buds cannot be lost to cold. The second is too much shade. A hydrangea in deep shade grows lush and leafy, and flowers poorly no matter how you prune it, because it lacks the light to fund flowers. Pruning cannot add light. The fix is the right location. The third is too much nitrogen, often from lawn feed nearby, which drives leafy growth at the expense of flowers. Again, no cut fixes that. The fix is to stop the nitrogen. So, pruning correctly, at the right time and in the right way, is genuinely the most common fix for a shy hydrangea. It is just not the only one, and knowing the difference stops you cutting a plant whose real problem was never the pruning. Let me pull the whole thing together. Before we finish, send this to one person you know who is not sure when or how to cut their hydrangea. Just the link. There is a very good chance it clears up a question they have been guessing at for years and saves them a season of flowers. Here is the whole thing. Both questions answered, in one piece. When and how to prune a hydrangea both come down to one thing: which of the 6 types you have, and whether it blooms on old wood or new wood. On when. The old wood types, the bigleaf mopheads and lace caps, the mountain, the oak leaf, and the climbing hydrangea, are pruned in summer, right after they finish flowering, and never in autumn, winter, or spring, because that is when next year's buds are on the stems. The new wood types, the panicle and the smooth Annabelle, are pruned in late winter or early spring while dormant, because they make their flowers fresh each year and have nothing to lose to a dormant cut. That single split decides all the timing. On how. The universal rules apply to every hydrangea. Clean, sharp tools. Cut just above a healthy pair of buds. Remove dead, damaged, or diseased wood any time, and when in doubt, do not cut. Then the old wood types want restraint, mostly deadheading, and the odd old stem removed, and the oak leaf and climber barely touched at all. The new wood types want a harder cut. The panicle back to a strong framework for big blooms, the Annabelle back to a low framework rather than the ground, so it can hold those heavy heads up. And be honest about the limits. Do not prune before winter, and if the plant will not bloom, remember that cold-killed buds, deep shade, and too much nitrogen are problems the shears cannot fix. Get the when right for your type. Keep the how simple. And you remove the single biggest reason a hydrangea refuses to flower, and turn a frustrating green bush into the best plant on the street. Subscribe and hit the bell, and stick around. We do this the honest way here in the Forgotten Knowledge Library. One plant at a time, told straight, including when the right answer is to leave the shears in the shed. It is free, and it always will be. And drop a comment telling me which type you have and when you have been cutting it, because I suspect this video just told a few of you exactly why your hydrangea has not been blooming. Next time, another plant where when you do the job matters far more than how. I will see you in the next one.